Availability on the blockchain. Minting creates availability, and availability can take different forms. You can create a token with some amount that needs to be mined and minted, like Bitcoin or like Ethereum. You can create a token that's connected to one of those original tokens that's also sort of like money in that every single token is alike, and you could trade those around among people. And if you have one first blood token and I have one first blood token, there's no reason for us to trade. They're identical. There's another type of token out there, a non-fungible token, and that's a unique digital gift. And with that, there are two ways to make those. And you can make them available either as you mint one of these and there's only one copy available, or you mint one of these and there's 50 copies available. So you might say that a evolution that's happened over time is the ability to make these copies. And so with that said, the next thing is network congestion. Network congestion as a part of this project was constantly with us. In order to get this project done, we're doing a series of small digital transactions, which if we're not using the blockchain and we're using ACID compliant databases like Postgres, I think that the amount of time and energy and effort that was spent doing these database transactions would have been maybe 15 minutes. But it took hours, because the way that things work in the blockchain is to make it available, you need to do a transaction onto this publicly available space. There's a price associated with it. If it's more people trying to transact at any given moment, the cost goes up in order to transact. And then that meant for us, we were bidding on these transactions and constantly maxing them out because we wanted this thing to be done faster in time for Valentine's Day. If we weren't pressed for time, we might not have paid those costs, but all the same, they are there. So it's sort of a model where if you look in the reality of a physical marketplace in Thailand, you have a open night market and vendors go with stalls. Each and every one of them pays to have their stall be there. If the amount of vendors goes up, that space is limited in that night market and the price of the stall goes up. It's the same with transacting on the blockchain. If you have some transactions you'd like to process, and so do many, many others, then those transaction prices go up. And so there's this sense of limited availability that is a piece of all of this. And as a result of that, certain new blockchains are popping up every day in order to increase availability. The one that we used for this project was called Polygon. Polygon is what's known as a layer 2 solution. What that means is it's connected to Ethereum, which is known as a layer 1. So while blockchains are somewhat new to the world, they are also becoming numerous, and they're hooking on to some of those originals like Ethereum in a way that they can batch transactions from their blockchain transaction ledger into a single transaction that attaches to Ethereum. So the net result is if a single transaction on Ethereum costs 300 USD, you can batch many, 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 many Polygon transactions together and then have that single batch be your 300 USD transaction. And in that way, you can have a more affordable way of making what you're working on available. We made Valentine's Day cards, and we sold them physically in and around New York and in Denver, Colorado. And there's a price associated with actually physically printing them, and there's a price associated with buying them. And all told, at the end of the day, it's a Valentine's Day card that you might have. You might cherish it if it came from a loved one. The piece of it that I think is true is we're not ever going to be making any Valentine's Day card for more than 300 USD. I don't know anybody we spent as much money as we could making these physical cards, and we couldn't make them for more than 10 US dollar per each on the finest watercolor paper with the best ink from the best printers who are almost saying it's ridiculous you want to go with us. We couldn't get it above $10. So now when you look at the digital transactions, we also want to make sure that we're getting these out, yet we could never do it on Ethereum. So having the Polygon network available made it so we can make these unique digital gifts, people can receive them, and they can do it for something commensurate with what it is, a Valentine's Day card. The integrity. I just shared with you the cards that we printed in reality. We did the absolute best printing that we could do. And there's something very nice about a Valentine's Day card, but it's also limited. The Valentine's Day card is 2D. It's flat. It's a PNG pixel file that's been printed onto a flat card. And our artists are capable of more. And at the end, I'll show that. What we wanted to put onto the blockchain and wanted to make special about the digital cards is that these would rotate in 3D space inside of a sort of psychedelic experience. So the cards went wavy and all of this stuff happened in the digital world, and it couldn't actually in physical world. That said, we are making attempts in this project to decentralize the storage of that. If you want to store a flat image, it's a few kilobytes of data. If you want to store a 3D rotational image, it's into about 60 megabytes of data. So we have this trade-off where we want to push up the quality of what we're delivering in a unique way and not able to maintain visual integrity. What we printed as gifts, we could make those corners super sharp and use polygons and all the modern computational methods to create very high def 3D models. But to do that would also be into the hundreds and hundreds of megabytes. So we had to sacrifice some visual integrity in order to maintain our compatibility with the blockchain. Now, that's one level of integrity that is lost. It's not that it's lost from the time it's on the blockchain. In fact, once it's on the blockchain, it's pretty much there, and it's pretty guaranteed to maintain its integrity. That said, to get it there, we had to make some sacrifices that we wouldn't have had to in another environment. Transactions have transaction times, and those that are high, we hit hiccup after hiccup. Related to the pricing conversation, if you don't pay a high enough price to transact, it takes longer and it may never happen. So we spent more time trying to bid enough to get something onto the blockchain. And in a case of doing Valentine's Day cards, where we made these NFTs of batch size, we might have put about 200 in the hands of other people. It's okay. Now, that said, the internet runs on millions and billions and trillions of transactions constantly. One provider at Amazon and the whole world going to it creates that high transaction volume. If it were as low a probability that those transactions would go through as they are on the blockchain, it would never stand up. So the transaction integrity, once it happens, is basically reliable as anything, except getting it to happen is not quite as straightforward as somewhere else in the world. In the world of computing, the terminology for one computer talking to another is API. And those APIs are often given service level agreements into what's known as either 4 nines or 5 nines, either 99.99% reliable or 99.999% reliable. So I'm going to take this 10-minute mark as a moment to adjust my thoughts on what I might say, but I'll also try to believe that David will extend the meeting out if he can. So transactions might be dropped, and connections to off-chain data might create a potential for loss. We get into retention. As long as there are people in the world who believe in blockchain, there will be retention. As long as there are people that are either mining, which is transacting in computing and calculating, there'll be Bitcoin. As long as there are people who are invested in their dollar cents in Polygon, there'll be stakers and there'll be Polygon. And they'll last for as long as that happens. So when you hear people that are in this pure conviction mode around blockchain and they sound a little bit wonkish or a little bit extreme, it's that type of conviction that is actually core to a blockchain. If nobody wants to mine, then there is no value. But if people want to mine, that value could last and last and last. And that's part of the appeal. Now, there's something of a concept of a full node in blockchain where a single physical computer like you and I own can contain the entire ledger of the blockchain, the entire history of transaction from the time it began for Bitcoin to today is storable by a single desktop computer. And many, many people do it. And then there are many services that provide access to that. So the retention is there and copied and multiplied in ways that are as far distributed as any computing project has ever been. And because of that, that retention is pretty well going to be as good as it gets. Now, there's also things to say about once it's on the internet, it never gets deleted. Many celebrities have had photos and stories and other things about their personal lives made public that they'd wanted to use legal means to get rid of. And it's just not possible. It's one of those things where too many people downloaded the image and then shared it and reshared it. And while you can try to choke the connection points like YouTube for video and YouTube will remove it, the reality is that there's plenty of videos that folks don't want made public that are, and they are available. So we wanted to make these cards and we wanted to retain them in a blockchain way. We did it with interplanetary file system. It's used to store the card images and it's used to store those GIFs that I'll be showing at the end. We used a lot of new vendors in this. I just stacked them all on top of each other, and it doesn't matter what their names are. It's just the oldest of these companies is maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years old. They're all relatively new. Some of them are worth into the billions. Some of them are smaller than that. Some of them are newer than that, and that they might have just come out in the last year or two. These are all fundamental to getting the heart bottoms delivered by text message, delivered by web, delivered by email, being able to update and being able to display them to the world. Used all of these very new vendors. And then there's even new vendors. There's these ones that are just out in the last couple of years that are specifically related to the blockchain work. And that means that we have a blend of very blockchain specific vendors that are now being obscured and being brought into the world by some of those other vendors that are also very new. It makes a very fast-paced environment. We got help with that. And Mintgate is a company started by a friend of mine. The woman standing in the back in pink, her name is Jennifer. And she partnered on the Heart Bottoms project with us. And then in front of her is the other team. And so I have direct access to the founder of a company. And having that made the Valentine's Day cards possible. The technology is not so good that you can just run with it on your own if you're a software engineer. I spent a lot of time building software projects with Upstate Interactive and with Flexen. And that means that I'm capable mostly of doing these things with the documentation available on the web. in this world, having a physical human connection is essential. And without that, this project cannot exist. And I'd say that many of the most successful people in the world of blockchain are connected to some very meaningful contributor in the space beyond just the documentation. We had a receptive audience for the Heart Bottoms cards. On the right here, Claire, before I approached her, was working in crypto voxels, which is a 3D metaverse blockchain, who knows what. But she knew what it was. And when I explained to her, I'm going to give her a Valentine's Day card that she can then pass on to a boyfriend or other similar person in her life, she loved the idea and went right for it. And as I said, we did some polling. Do you want NFTs? Are they good or bad? Out of 135 people, about 100 said they're bad. So we had the right audience, and not everybody that we gave Valentine's Day cards actually wanted the NFT version. We started on January 23rd. We ended on February 14. Of the 105 that we minted, that means the ones that we made and we prepared inventory for, 65 were claimed. So that means people said that 62% of the time they wanted what we made. We offered these out for free. Nobody had to pay for a single heart bottom. If they wanted a digital heart bottom, they could get it for $0. And they didn't have to take the connection to the blockchain. They could just get the image. That said, 40 of them sold for a total of $200. Average was $5. And we had one person offer to pay $25. That's right. Here are the numbers. I said 100 before. It was 125 out of 138 people said that NFTs are bad. They did that anonymously in the poll. But that said, it made us redefine what NFT meant for this project. Never ending feels truly, or unique digital gift. Just something that didn't say exactly that polluted acronym. We had a team, 5 of us, writers, programmers, and designers. These are folks that basically got together to spread the love. They didn't have such an idealistic or ideological bent on anything to do with blockchain. And I loved that part about the project. It was just people coming together to make things. And of course, February 14 came and we got to go out in the physical world and give out and get together and be together. And I think that's as big a reward as any value that you get from minting a coin or otherwise profiting on the sale of an NFT. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. I'll do Q&A. We'll do it in the next session. And I look forward to chatting with everybody about it up until the end of the hour. Thank you for having me so much. Y'all are so good as a participatory audience. And I just can't say enough about wanting to get involved in art and connecting to the digital world. The blockchain's been as fun a way to do it as any of us have had. Cheers.
Yeah. So